Sports 1440 in frozen Edmonton, but I don't think we're alone in being frozen. Kevin Lehman, you're joining us from Iowa City, Iowa. It's a little bit cold down there, my friend.
Well, probably not as cold as you've got it. It was a -7 yesterday, and we have a balmy +1 today. But no snow, and that's a good sign.
Out in the shorts and T-shirt weather. That's for Edmonton. That's for sure. Kevin, thanks so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. I know you've been on the road a lot lately. Talk about the schedule that you've been keeping.
Well, I do a lot of Valley games and sprinkling some Big 12 opponents in there, but if I go way back to November when this started, I go to Virgin Islands every year, Paul. And
gee, that's tough, Kevin. Tournament. I'm sorry, man. What you give is amazing.
What's that?
What you give to the game is amazing. Sacrificing yourself to go to the Virgin Islands. Yeah. I'm so impressed.
I've learned to go in. I take my girlfriend with me, go in 5 days early to visit a few of the other surrounding islands. But once that starts, Paul, that's 4 games a day. So you're on air from basically noon, and you get back to your hotel about 12. You do it again the next day. So we do 24 games in 9 days. So that kind of kicks off my basketball season. And then I do a lot of the Northern Iowa games. I'm their main broadcast for that, and unless a Valley game comes up or a Big 12. So I just got back this last week. I had Northern Iowa and Illinois State, and then because of the weather, Paul, ESPN said, hey, can you get down to St. Louis and cover the Kentucky State game versus SIU, Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, because that analyst had problems with some travel problems. So I bopped down there, and I just got home late last night. And perfect timing. It's my girlfriend's birthday this weekend. I said, they gave me the weekend off because it's your birthday.
Oh, you sweet talker, you.
Yeah, she believed it too, Paul.
Oh, my gosh. You are good. You are smooth. So let's jump into, you're in the Missouri Valley Conference, mid-major conference. You are you have a year or two now under your belt, Kevin, with NIL money becoming so much of a factor in how college basketball is really starting to take shape and form. And we're going to dive into the power conferences in a little bit, but I'm very, very curious about your perspective, Kevin, on how this landscape with the transfer portal allowing almost complete freedom of movement of players from school to schools, the amount of money that's changing hands, what mid-majors are able to come up with in terms of financial resources, and how this flow of both personnel and capital is affecting the mid-major world of NCAA Division I basketball.
Well, Paul, that is a great question because we always focus on those power conferences, especially during football and what their salaries are and their payrolls. But so if you look at mid-major basketball, we have what we call a talent drain. So usually if you make a first or second team All-League Valley, you're going to get poached. For example, we've got 2 players from Southern Illinois. One of them's playing for BYU. The other one took $450,000 is the number you hear, and we hear all kinds of numbers. Go to Texas A&M. So that, and then, but it's also, we're seeing the mid-majors dive into Division II, NAIA schools. So they're going to the levels below them and try and find their best players, and they move up a level. Plus, there's some guys that we don't talk about also that are at the Power Fives, the major conferences, that are falling back down into the mid-majors because they were, a lot of times they're 4-star recruits. You know the type. They're really athletic. They don't know quite how to play the game, and they'll filter back down the mid-majors. But as far as NIL, Paul, it's interesting because just like other leagues, you have the haves and the have-nots. There are those who are going to invest heavily in their basketball programs. Our best example is Murray State, new coach, 15 new players, top of the league right now. And amazingly, they have the highest NIL money. They're talking around $2 million. Most of the other mid-majors in this league, the Valley League, has around $750,000 to $1 million. So they're dealing with twice the payroll, and they're telling people up front, we're going to $4 million as soon as we can.
And that's such an interesting development because now you have literally business organizations as part of the athletic programs running their programs, running it like a business, salary. You're looking at your salaries, what you can pay people, trying to evaluate what they're worth within the pot that you've got to work with. The complexity and the dynamics of coaching, recruiting, retention, all of the factors that have always been a part of any college athletics program, that's all turned on its head right now. Because now, like you said, because there's no cap, you've got a Murray State in a conference where you're dealing with $750,000 to $1 million. They double that, and they're looking to double that again. That puts pressure on everybody else. And I guess one question I have that I get asked a lot is, where does the money come from? Does it come from the school, the athletic budget, or does it come from sponsors and benefactors? Most likely, I'm guessing it's a combination of both. But where do the funds actually come from, Kevin?
Well, the NIL money, which stands for name, image, and likeness, is coming from private donors. So they may have a deal with that particular student athlete that he's going to do commercials, say, for a car dealership, and then be paid accordingly. The issue is, what's the value of that? And when it goes through the court system, no one can really say what the value of that person is, being the spokesperson for that particular business. But because of the House settlement that came through July 1st, and what we call revenue sharing, and at the highest level, the football conferences are allowed to give, I think, $20.5 million of what they call revenue share. So a lot of that, I think, is coming from TV revenue, those types of things, and the school's going to disperse those. So the NIL, because of that, Paul, most of the institutions have taken their NIL, which used to be separate from the university, the name, image, likeness pool, now it's under the umbrella of the university. But here's what's interesting, Paul. So Murray State has a general manager.
Right.
He decides who's getting the money. The head coach doesn't have to deal with it, because that can become a little bit of a dicey situation if I'm the head coach deciding how much you get, because it's not supposed to be pay for play or pay for performance. So that's the gray areas that we're dealing with. And, Paul, you'll love this part. The general managers are treating this like they're an NFL or a major league team. They know what each position commands. For example, in football, in the high levels, those your quarterback, $4 million at a minimum. They're doing the same thing with basketball. What's a point guard worth in this market? What's the center work in this market? And we're going to pay accordingly. That's the piece I found really interesting, that we've come into that type of business model in college basketball.
Well, it is interesting from the standpoint, like you said, you have a general manager now. It's all business. How that correlates to the coach. Do you think there is in any of the influence taking place right now? Listen, we've got this kid here. We're paying him, $700,000. He's not playing that well, or he's not playing enough. Do you think there are any pressures being applied to the coaches to play the players that are being paid the most? Or do you think it's a relatively successful at being arm's length and just business is business, and coaching on the court, that's completely up to the coach himself or herself?
Well, I think if you have the resource to hire a general manager, it takes that off the head coach's plate and makes that much easier. Here's the problem you run into, Paul. We use the term donor fatigue, because if I'm the donor that's contributing to that NIL and he's not playing, or the quarterback, because they're more high profile, and you got to go to that booster again and say, hey, we're recruiting this young man. Can you do this type of deal for him? That's, I think, where the issues come in, because, you asked me last year and that you didn't play that guy. So now you want me to come back and do it again? And also, those donors used to be the business people you went to, or boosters, alumni that helped build your facilities. So now they're getting double dipped. We need money for facility upgrades. We need money for player retention.
Now, when you're talking about, and I'm talking to Kevin Lehman, he is a voice of the Missouri Valley Conference and the Big 12, longtime broadcaster in college basketball, joining us here on Hoop City with Paul Scher. Kevin, donor fatigue. This is a relatively new arena. You've got universities with installing general managers, like you mentioned at Murray State, but you hear like of business departments surrounding athletics departments now cropping up everywhere. That's becoming the norm, not the exception anymore. So you have this rapidly evolving landscape with lots and lots of zeros at the end of checks being written to athletes coming and going with abandon, and the complexity and the moving parts, coupled with donor fatigue and the constant asks by the business managers of these athletics departments. How's that going to look in 5 years, in your opinion? How's this going to evolve? I guess when I think about it, here's my question. Is this sustainable in its present form, or do some controls have to be put into place by the now bizarro world NCAA organization?
I'm going to give you two parts.
That was about 20 questions, by the way. So,
number one, if you have a Mark Cuban, like Indiana football, it's probably sustainable. But if you don't, it's not sustainable.
Right.
But, Mark Cuban, how deep are his pockets? And there's some schools that have that type of booster that can do that. And that's, you talk about Indiana, I don't know what their payroll is. I'm sure it's not near what Ohio State's football payroll was. But we saw, I'm sure you watched the national championship game. Who's down the sidelines afterwards? It's Mark Cuban is right in the midst of it.
Yes.
And then here's my other question. Now, they've had that great success in basketball at Indiana. Does that take away from the funds going into basketball for Darren DeVries, my former player, to fund his players? How big is that pot? So and at the mid-majors, obviously that pot's a little bit smaller. Now, what's helping Murray State tack to their picture, they have a young man named John Morant who's playing for the Memphis Grizzlies, and the head coach's brother is his agent. So I'm sure that helps. I don't know the exact intricacies of how that economic system is set up, and I'm sure it has not hurt the ability of Murray State to capitalize on this NIL. But as far as you're saying, no, not sustainable. And you saw this situation. Have you followed the Duke quarterback that's trying to leave? And
absolutely.
His NIL agreement was 2 years. So there's a lawsuit right there.
Well, and I believe a similar situation, not identical, but similar, is happening in Washington, at the University of Washington as well. And you're right. Now players are coming. They're signing 2-year deals. They want to get out. They can make more money elsewhere, or they, for whatever reason, the typical reasons sometimes still apply, where players want to move from one university to the other because they don't like the coach. They don't feel like the program's up to what their expectations are. But now you've got this model, which is just, and when I was referring before, Kevin, to the bizarro world NCAA, think back 20 years. I mean, think back, if you bought your team, and this is one of many true stories about the NCAA. I knew Rick Majerus, and he was close friends with one of, a lot of my friends. But he got in trouble with the NCAA for buying pizza for his players after a practice once, and they did an NCAA investigation. I mean, you remember the draconian approach that the NCAA used to take on virtually everything in terms of rules enforcement, to the point where it was just silly. And now it's like you throwing the doors wide open and said, have at it. What the hell, guys? We don't care. Do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. Pay them whatever you want. And it's like the shackles were taken off and the inmates were allowed to run the asylum. And it's just such a bizarre switch in a relatively short period of time.
Well, that Majerus story makes me think of there's a restriction by the NCAA that you could provide a bagel, but no cream cheese.
I believe it. Like, they were nuts. They were nuts. The amount of I just had this image of this hall in Indianapolis being filled with all these guys with horn-rimmed glasses and, pocket protectors, just looking for little things that they could go after. And now it's like, J.R. Ewing, it's like, what the hell, guys? Just pay them whatever.
Well, the NCAA can't win a court case. That's the problem.
No,
and that's opened up this movement for players. Now, I think what's going to solve it, but I don't know if it will ever happen, is collective bargaining, which would mean the players have to unionize. And as I was listening to a podcast the other day about former NFL players said, we have a hard time getting those football teams to unionize. How are you going to do it with 361 Division I college basketball teams, not to mention Division II, Division III, how far down the ladder it goes, to get those people to agree on a collective bargaining issue? And that would make your student athletes employees, I believe, of the university, which now makes that income more taxable. And there's a lot of other answers to it. But yeah, it's the issue. Why would you sign a 2-year contract if you're a student athlete on an NIL deal? Because if you have a great year, your market price just went up. But I guess it's similar to a basketball coach. But usually, if he has a great year, they're going to extend his contract, add to it, etc. So I'm sure those things are happening now with players also. But I think this Duke case is going to be really interesting, because does he have to compensate Duke if he breaks that contract? I think is what we're going to find out in the court system.
Absolutely. So all of a sudden, this is professional sports, and it's going to be treated as such in the courts. As you said, the NCAA has been at such a disadvantage in its ability to enact laws and then have them stand up in court. And when we come back, and we have to take a real quick break here, Kevin, but when we come back, I want to talk about the reality that the requests for longer periods of eligibility that seems to be creeping in now, of like, why just 4 years? Why just 5 years? What does a red shirt mean anymore? You don't have, you play JUCO, you can, that doesn't count against your eligibility. Like, why can't you play 8 years at a school? Like, those kind of questions are going to be interesting. So we'll take a quick break. We'll come back with Kevin Lehman, Missouri Valley, a longtime broadcaster, joining us here on sports, on Hoop City, on your Sports 1440 Edmonton leader, and we'll be right back after these messages. Kevin, today we're doing songs from 1967 for no real reason other than...
Classic. That would make me 12 years old.
Well, you're a youngster. You're just a youngster, just a pup. Kevin, going back to my very, very inarticulate departure there, going into break, tell me what you think. Tell me what you think that the request for extending eligibility, is there a pathway forward where that may have some real challenges for the NCAA to be able to justify why players can only play for a certain amount of time?
Paul, that is a great question, because when this thing started years ago, we had COVID. We had the lawsuits of players trying to get extra years of eligibility because the coach left, or the COVID or an injury. And I always said this, think back last year, Kansas's center, Hunter Dickinson, okay, not an NBA player. He can make much more money playing at Kansas than he would ever professionally. If I was him, I would sue the NCAA and say, you're restricting my earnings. Why you only allow me 4 years of eligibility? Let me play till I'm 30 for Kansas, because he's going to have more income potential there. I don't know where Hunter Dickinson is today. He's probably overseas playing, and who knows, what conditions or what he's getting paid. But that was always in the back of my mind. Someone's going to bring that case up and sue the NCAA. But you've seen it, what you're talking about. You get eligibility back for being in junior college, in NAIA school. Is it Pavio, the quarterback from Vanderbilt, opened that can of worms?
That's right.
And there was a lot of talk last summer, Paul, and I heard a lot of it from coaches, that the NCAA was going to do 5 years of eligibility, period. You're hurt, that's part of your 5 years. But you can play 5 if you stayed healthy. There's no medical redshirt, you just had a 5-year window. That kind of went away quietly in the fall, and I'm not sure why, because I know the NCAA was really thinking heavily about doing that.
Well, it's interesting because there again, I think they'd have an awfully tough time in court if you're dealing with a catastrophic injury that does bench a player for a full year and then say you can't play the 5th, but somebody, just because of the good fortune of staying healthy, is able to play the full 5 years. So I can see the NCAA once again having a real tough time making a coherent argument that would stand up in court. And that really, Kevin, has been the lifeblood of the NCAA historically, is a lot of their policies weren't fair. They were weird.
Exactly.
You know, they were very much at the expense of the athlete in terms of what they restricted both the athlete and the coaches and what they could do.
I tell you, Paul, and this is years ago, when I left high school and went to play college, it kind of hit me like, this is no longer I'm playing for my school and high school and my classmates, but this is a business. And it really kind of hit me as a college player that I'm involved in a business now, and this coach is making business decisions. And I always thought it strange that, okay, I don't have any compensation for this. I'm putting in, back now it's limited to 20 hours a week, but if you're serious about your game, you're putting in 30 to 40 hours a week, and so you're returning your payment, but you got room, board, tuition, books, and fees. That was the old scholarship. But here's where the NCAA messed up, and I know this was water way over the bridge, but the Ed O'Banion case,
right?
Where Ed O'Banion's sitting with his nephew, and the nephew's playing that video game, and Ed says, "That's me on that screen. It looks like me. It's got my numbers, got UCLA on the front." And he sued. If the NCAA would just said, "Okay, we're going to give players, 10% of the profits or whatever," then they might have avoided all this. But that never happened, and now we're at the situation we're at now. It's just court case after court case, and the NCAA is not doing well in those court cases.
It's really interesting. One of the interesting facets to this are some of the voices. The old guard voices that are coming out and are the clarions of not doom and gloom, but the clarions of what's wrong with this present system. Tom Izzo, from Michigan State. But one that just really cracks me up is John Calipari. I mean, you look at John Calipari and his successful yet checkered career with championships. And I heard one coach describe it really well, is we used to have to go in the back door to give the players the money. Now we can come through the front door and just give it to them. And that's really
and
true.
The bags are probably even bigger now.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now you look at a place like BYU, both in football and basketball. Deep pockets, they have transformed both programs into top 10, or borderline top 10 in the football world, but definitely are right around top 10. They're to me a classic example of the haves, where it's going to lead down the road to the haves and have-nots, because they have such a depth of big, successful corporate graduates that they're going to be able to tap into for many, many years, where a lot of other schools that are smaller alumni bases, not as affluent alumni bases, they're going to have a real tough time competing with that over the long term. Wouldn't you agree?
That's a great example, Paul, because when I was spending that time in the Virgin Islands in 85-degree temperature, a little bit on the beach, BYU women were there, and I stay and do the women's tournament now. And the BYU coach I can't think of his name right now, but he was an All-American for BYU back probably about 12 or 15 years ago. You would recognize the name if you heard it. And I asked him, I said, "Coach, what has moving to the Big 12 done for you?" Because, we've seen on the men's side, DeBanchi getting paid all that money. He goes, "It has opened up a whole new world for us." Because basically his statement was, we just woke up a sleeping giant. Because our alumni base is so excited about being the Big 12. They were in the West Coast. That's why this thing has exploded, because that alumni base, as you know, for BYU is coast to coast and actually worldwide. So that opened up just the exposure now in the Big 12 conference has opened up all sorts of revenue for that school and those sports that you just spoke about.
The best player on the BYU women's team is from the province of Alberta.
Yes,
Delaney Gibb.
Freshman.
Yeah, Delaney Gibb, and
yep.
I have two nephews that are playing on the football team, or a nephew with two sons that are playing on the football team, and we hear about their program and all that they're putting into it. But I agree with you about the sleeping giant. The LDS Church has more money than the Catholic Church.
Yes,
it is the wealthiest church in the world. And the success that their alumni have in business is staggering. And I guess that's where this is all going to lead to. We're going to end up with the pyramid, which we kind of always have had with
right.
We're talking about the blue bloods. In that respect, it hasn't changed. And here's something, Kevin, that I find most interesting, at least for the time being. This isn't hurting ratings. People watching sport. I mean, and I wanted to ask you this. I watch the NCAA right now, And when you look at the top 25, 30, 35 teams, these are some of the most complete teams, top to bottom, that I've seen in a long, long time. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that they have been able to move pieces around and bring new talented pieces into their program to create really, really good basketball teams.
Oh, I got a good story on that one, Paul. But here's the second part of what you're saying. Also, players are staying longer rather than going. If you're a second-round pick, I'm going to stay and make more money at Michigan or wherever I'm at than being a second-round non-guaranteed pick at Iowa.
That's right.
Bennett Sturts was going to be probably an early second rounder. He came to Iowa. Now they're projecting mid-first round. So to your point, there's more talent at the higher levels now. Plus, they can acquire the best players from the mid-majors that we previously spoke about. And I had a conversation with my boss, my coordinating producer at ESPN years ago, and his take was how great college basketball is becoming, because if I'm at Kansas and I need a point guard, I go out and get one. Mike was saying, my thing to him was, it's kill the mid-majors. He didn't care because he's worried about viewership at the top. He said, we have a better product at the top than we've ever had because of what you just mentioned, Paul. And I kind of like, okay, I just sound like a dummy because I'm pleading the case for mid-majors where there aren't as many eyeballs. He's looking at the big picture because when we have our weekly calls, we're going to show you, hey, this one drew 2.5 million or whatever. Because that's the eyeball and the lens he's using. So to your point, yes, at the top, unbelievable talent. But you're seeing the haves and the have-nots. And also, what's up is down, down is up. Indiana is now a football school, and Nebraska is a basketball school.
It's unbelievable to watch those two programs in the way that you just described them. I mean, the Indiana story in football is a story for the ages, in sports in general, really and truly. What Freddie Hoiberg is doing at Nebraska is absolutely incredible. In fact, I'll ask you about two programs, Nebraska, number one, and Miami of Ohio, number two, which kind of flies in the face of the mid-major theory, doesn't it? Yes,
it does. And I see they got ranked fine this year. My play-by-play, who I did the game with Thursday, has the Miami game, I think, Tuesday. And I'm not sure they're playing, but he was really excited because there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on that one because they're one of the three undefeateds left. But when you look at the net and those types of things, and I was just looking before we went on air about where Lenardi has these people seated. I didn't quite find where Miami is, but I still think because of their inability to get quad 1 and quad 2 wins, they'll probably be seated somewhere, I'm just guessing now, 12, 13, 14, if they continue this run.
Right.
But here's what you're going to see, though, Paul. It's interesting because the Blue Bloods that we've talked about, Kansas, UCLA, or Indiana, now we're seeing BYU's. Iowa State is getting Houston, not traditional Blue Bloods. Last year we had Florida win. Some say, that may be a Blue Blood. But whatever. The point is, those BYUs of the world, it's a whole new era for them. And some of these other Blue Bloods, I heard this comment from Bill Self just about 2 weeks ago. He said, hey, here's what's different now. I used to have NBA guys sitting on my bench. I don't have them there now because they're playing for somebody else because they're getting more money than I could have gave them as a bench player. So therefore, that talent pool has been spread out amongst those upper echelon schools.
That really is interesting. A school that is having a great year, a great start so far, that I'm curious about in 5 years is Gonzaga. Small market, doesn't have what you would probably say with the kind of pool of alumni revenue that a BYU would have, just to use BYU as the comparative here. But so far, Mark Few and his staff have done extremely well. And then his longtime assistant, Tommy Lloyd, top team in the country right now at the University of Arizona. Gonzaga has had such an interesting impact on the sport of college basketball because of where it's located. Really makes no sense. Just built something out of nothing and have been able to sustain it, and not only sustain it, but spread the wealth of their success now to a very high-profile school at the University of Arizona.
Well, yeah, that the recruiting of Tommy Lloyd is, and maybe Gonzaga is going to suffer a little bit because his recruiting contacts are now the benefit of Arizona. I've got friends that were mid-major coaches, and everyone wanted to be, every mid-major AD said, we're going to be the Gonzaga of the Midwest. And my good friend was, I think he was at Ball State, and he went and got all of Gonzaga's financials for recruiting budgets, et cetera, et cetera. This is prior to NIL, and he went in his AD's office and he threw it in the desk. He goes, I'm all in. And AD says, what? He goes, I'm all in. You want to be Gonzaga? Here's what they're using. Here's what they're spending. So we'll start spending it, and we'll be like Gonzaga. Of course, the AD wasn't quite prepared for that one because they don't understand that the resources Gonzaga has to get that program where it's at. But I'm kind of with you, Paul. Let's see how going forward, can Gonzaga stay at that level? Because 2 years ago, we had Indiana State in the Valley, made a great run, just missed the tournament because of one loss they had at home. And all those players left along with the coach. And now Indiana's still in the second division again. And Drake made a great run. Drake's in the second division of the Valley right now. So I think in mid-major, Miami, Ohio might be a good case too. Where are they going to be in the next 2, 3, or 4 years? Is this a one-time event?
Right.
Because I guarantee their Miami players, they got eligibility left, they won't be there next year.
Well, and
the majority will be gone.
And you see in all sports, whether it's football or basketball, the exodus, the mass exodus from certain schools. I believe Iowa State had something like 20 of their football players leave when their coach took off. And now, I mean, they've got to literally rebuild a pretty darn strong program from scratch. Again, that's going to be tough when you have these mass movements and mass exoduses, if that's the right word, happening within schools. And it goes back, I think, and this is a question I really want your opinion on, Kevin. What is the trickle-down effect on kids, high school, junior high? Like, what are they thinking and seeing? Because, for example, Steph Curry in the mid-teens when his great three-point shooting prowess really came to the forefront. You walk into any gym anywhere, and you've got kids, grade 5, grade 6, hucking up threes from God knows where, clanging off backboards, no idea. But that's what they saw. That's what they wanted to be. Kids want to be what their heroes, they want to do what their heroes are doing. Now, what is this impact where it's all this money, all this movement, it trickling down into prep schools? Does it trickle down? I'm sure it does into high schools now. The net effect of this is going to be really interesting, and I have no idea what that net effect will be.
Well, this is the argument you're hearing from Tom Izzo and some others when we're hearing of G League players, Ignite players that are professionals getting eligibility left. We have the case right now where the player going to Alabama has got to stay from the judge who is an Alabama booster, the judge is.
Yeah.
But I think what Tom Izzo made a great point about is, what about our high school players? Because we're limiting their opportunities because we're giving scholarships now to professionals, whether from overseas in Europe or now. And that's why the courts and the NCAA did not fight these G League players, because they've had a whole influx of foreign players that are professionals coming to the U.S. So how can we limit someone that did not play in an NBA game but played in the G League or the Ignite on the Ignite team?
Well, that goes back to the old argument about when the United States was not allowed to have NBA players in the Olympics, even though European pros were, playing all the time. They were paid professionals as well. But you're right. They didn't fight it because they can't. So my question to you is, what effect is this having on the junior college world? Do you have any kind of a sense of that? Because it no longer counts against your eligibility. Isn't that an avenue that young players are going to want to start taking, is just going right to JUCO and try to start making their way up the food chain by keeping their eligibility and proving that they can play?
I think I'm seeing more of those high school kids go to prep schools than junior colleges. Now, I am seeing more junior college players in mid-majors, but I think you have to go back to our eras, maybe 20, 30 years ago, where you saw JUCO players go to the high majors. That's not happening anymore. The prep schools have become so predominant, and I think that's what's going to happen now. If you're really talented high school senior, and there's limited scholarships because who's taking them? Foreign players are taking them. Now we got professional players in the U.S. taking them.
That's right.
So those players are getting funneled into prep schools more than we've seen in the past. And that's the biggest argument. If we're opening up this world of college basketball for professional players, we're limiting the access for our high school seniors coming out to get scholarship opportunities and to get into programs.
And the retort most likely will be, well, if you're like Boozer at Duke, you're fine. So for the elite players, it won't be a problem. They're good enough to play at any time at any level. But it's the kid, like I'd hate to be a 6'3" guard right now who's pretty good, who normally would have gotten a D2 or a low to mid-major D1 offer. Those kids are going to be overlooked now, and they're going to have to find their way into the ecosystem a little bit differently because everybody's going to be looking for ways to move around and to get experienced players onto their roster.
But Paul, I've seen this scenario is happening too. So that player you mentioned is going to go D2. If he's good,
he's going up.
He's going to move up to a mid-major. Now, Northern Iowa had their best recruiting class on paper, entered the class of 25-26. And they're telling these players, because here's another fallout that we're seeing because of the high majors going to the portal rather than take a high school player because they're looking for the proven commodity. The mid-majors are getting more talented freshmen because there are more kids available to them now because
that's a fair point.
Yep, the Big 12, Big 10, Big East, ACC didn't take them. But Northern Iowa, in their case, said, hey, come. This is what the good majors are telling people. And Akron's the same thing. I had them in the Virgin Islands. Come here for 2 years.
Yep.
And you can make some real money.
Yep.
So, in essence, and I heard this from the Oregon State coach, Wayne Tinkle, he goes, I've become a junior college. Come here for 2 years, increase your value. And Wayne Tinkle's team a year ago, they were in the Virgin Islands too, so I had a long discussion with him. His top 5 players went in the portal before they went to that Crown tournament in Vegas at the end of the season. Combined, they were making $450,000 from Oregon State. He told me today they've all transferred out. They're making a combined $4.5 million.
So 10 times what they were able to pay out at Oregon State. And Wayne Tinkle, he was a heck of a player.
Great guy.
Great player and a great guy.
He said, we become a junior college. I'm thinking, this is Oregon State. This is Ralph Miller.
Yes.
This is the glove. I mean, and he said junior college. I was just shocked. But he was right. I mean, he can't keep his good players.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, Kevin. Thank you for being so generous with your time this weekend. It's been so much fun talking to you, and I hope we can do this again real soon, particularly as we get ready for the March Madness that's just around the corner. But thanks so much for spending time today.
Hey, it's always a pleasure, Paul. And you stay warm where you're at, and I've got my wood burner stove going down here.
Get your wood burning stove, go take your girlfriend out for a nice dinner, and thanks again for being with us today, Kevin.
Okay, always my pleasure.